Salam alaikum. Alright everyone, today we're continuing chapter 17 on the Civil War. We're moving into lesson 4, which starts on page 474 in your textbook. The title of this lesson is The Strain of War, and that word strain is key. By 1862 and 1863, this war was putting enormous pressure on both sides. Let's find out how.
Here's what we're doing today. First, you'll be answering guiding questions 1 and 2 from lesson 4. You should open your packet to lesson 4 activity. All of the questions are in your packet. Second, you'll finish up by answering the year review questions for day 6. We'll get to both, but let's start with the lesson content. So here's the big picture for this lesson. The war was getting more intense in 1862 and 1863. The South had some real advantages early on, strong generals, and they were fighting on their own land. The North, on the other hand, kept struggling. They had more men and more resources, but they couldn't find the right generals to actually win. That tension, the South winning battles it shouldn't have been winning, the North losing battles it shouldn't have been losing, that's what this whole lesson is about. Lesson 4 has 3 main sections. First, we'll look at Southern victories. What was going right for the Confederacy? Second, we'll talk about African Americans in the Civil War, which is a really important and often overlooked part of this story. And third, we'll see how the tide finally started to turn. We complete the 3rd section on Friday. For today, we're starting on page 474. Okay, guiding question 1 is on your packet. Take a look. It asks, what factors contributed to the early success of the Confederate forces? As we go through the next few slides and the reading, I want you thinking about that question. Take notes so you can answer it in your packet.
General, the flanking maneuver on the right seems promising. Agreed, we must press the advantage while we have it. The terrain is favorable.
The military leadership of Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson was a key factor in the Confederates' military success in the East. With their knowledge of the land and ability to inspire troops, these two generals often defeated larger Union forces. The Battle of Fredericksburg. After Antietam, Robert E. Lee moved his army out of Maryland into Virginia. This encouraged the newly named Union commander, General Ambrose Burnside, to march his troops toward the Confederate capital at Richmond. Lee intercepted the Union army near Fredericksburg. Lee's forces dug trenches in hills south of the town. This gave them the advantage of higher ground from which to fight. On December 13, 1862, Union forces attacked. Lee's entrenched troops drove them back with heavy losses. Devastated, Burnside resigned. Just to lock that in, December 1862, Burnside attacks Lee at Fredericksburg. Lee's men are dug in on high ground. The Union charges uphill, gets cut down, and loses badly. Burnside resigns. One general down, but there are more to come. Victory at Chancellorsville. In May 1863, Lee met Union forces led by General Joseph Hooker in the Battle of Chancellorsville. General Lee again showed daring and a brilliant command of tactics. Although Hooker had twice as many men, Lee divided his forces. Some Confederate troops confronted the main Union force. Others, under the leadership of Stonewall Jackson, secretly marched to a spot at the far end of the Union line. The risky plan worked perfectly. Jackson's army surprised the Union force with a crushing attack on its flank, or side. Lee struck from the front. Caught between the two Confederate forces, Hooker eventually withdrew his men. The Confederate victory came at a high cost. In the confusion of battle, Confederate soldiers fired on and wounded Stonewall Jackson by mistake. Surgeons amputated Jackson's arm, prompting Lee to say, "He has lost his left arm, and I have lost my right." Worse, Jackson developed pneumonia. After a week of suffering, he died. His death cost the South one of its great leaders. It also affected the morale of its army and its citizens. So, Chancellorsville. Lee beats a bigger army through bold tactics, but Stonewall Jackson is shot by friendly fire and dies. A Confederate victory, but a painful one.
In less than a year, 3 different generals have failed to lead the Union to victory. Where do we find a man capable of this task?
Problems with Union leadership. In contrast, Union leadership in the East disappointed the president. In less than a year, a frustrated Lincoln saw 3 different generals try and fail to lead the Union to victory. The first, Major General George McClellan, commanded the Union forces at the Battle of Antietam in March 1862. Although he was expert at preparing for battle, he was overly careful and slow to act. Said Lincoln, "If McClellan doesn't want to use the army, I'd like to borrow it for a while." The last straw came when, after victory at Antietam, McClellan failed to obey Lincoln's order to follow the retreating Confederate troops and destroy them. Lincoln's next commander needed to prove himself quickly. Major General George Meade took command 3 days before one of the war's great battles at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Quick summary: McClellan, too slow and cautious. Burnside, too reckless. Hooker, too overconfident, still lost. Lincoln needed someone who could actually go toe-to-toe with Robert E. Lee and win. Quick summary: McClellan, too slow and cautious. Burnside, too reckless. Hooker, too overconfident, still lost. Lincoln needed someone who could actually go toe-to-toe with Robert E. Lee and win. We finished Section 1, Southern Victories. Now we're moving to Section 2, African Americans in the Civil War. Turn to page 476 in your textbook. Guiding question 2 is also in your packet. It asks, what role did African Americans play in military efforts? Same deal as before. Take notes as we go through this section so you can write your answer. Take a moment to locate the question in your packet. By now, you should have answered the first guiding question. African Americans in the Civil War. At first, both the North and the South barred African Americans from serving in their armies. As time passed, the North relaxed its rules. Excluded in the South. Even though African Americans made up more than 30% of the smaller Southern population, Confederate leaders would not allow them to enlist. Only in the last days of the war, when defeat drew near, did they consider it. Confederate leaders feared that once armed, African American soldiers would attack their fellow troops or even begin a general revolt. The Confederacy kept African Americans out of military service out of fear of rebellion. They only reconsidered near the very end of the war, when it was too late to matter. Enlisted in the North. At first, President Lincoln resisted calls to enlist African Americans in the Union Army. He feared that such a policy would be unpopular in the border states. By 1862, though, it was clear that the North needed more soldiers in order to defeat the Confederacy. Many African Americans were eager to fight. As a result, Congress decided to reverse past policy and allow the formation of all African American regiments. These new Union soldiers were in a tough position. Many white Union regiments doubted their fighting ability. Others resented them. Many Southern troops also especially hated the Union's African American soldiers. They often focused their fiercest fire on African American regiments. Despite this, African Americans joined. By the end of the war, they made up about 10% of the Union Army. Some were freed people from the North. Others had fled enslavement in the South. These men fought hard and effectively, too. As one white Union officer wrote about an all-African American Kansas regiment, Lincoln was cautious, Congress acted, and black men enlisted. They faced racism from their own side and from the enemy, but they served anyway, and they proved themselves. This is a recruitment poster from the time. It was published by the Committee for Recruiting Black Soldiers in Philadelphia. It says, "Come and join us, brothers." Look at the image. Black soldiers in full Union uniform, standing proudly with the American flag. In 1863, this image was a powerful statement. These men were claiming their right to serve, to fight, to be part of this country, even when the country hadn't treated them as full citizens. The 54th Massachusetts. The best-known African-American regiment was the 54th Massachusetts. Founded in 1863, the 54th was under the command of Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, who came from a Boston abolitionist family. Later that year, the 54th served on the front lines in an assault on Fort Wagner in South Carolina. Confederate gunfire caused nearly 300 casualties in the 54th alone, including Colonel Shaw. Though the Union could not capture the fort, the 54th became famous for the courage and sacrifice of its members. It would also serve with distinction in other battles, such as the Battle of Olustee in Florida. The 54th Massachusetts became a symbol. They lost the battle at Fort Wagner, but they proved to the whole nation that black soldiers would fight and die for their freedom and for their country. And that proof changed how people thought about African American service in the military. Okay, we're shifting gears now to year review. These questions go back to chapters we covered earlier in the year, chapters 9 and 10. Today is day 6. You have 4 packets to work from. Let me walk you through what each one is asking. Reminder, there are 4 packets with 4 distinct day 6 questions. Pause the video to answer your packet day 6 question. Take 10 minutes to review the lesson and answer your guiding questions. Packet 1 goes back to Chapter 9, Lesson 3, The First Political Parties, page 256. The essential question is, how do governments change? And your specific question asks, what does the rise of political parties reveal about how the new government was changing and evolving? Find Packet 1 and start there. Packet 2 is from Chapter 10, Lesson 1, A New Party in Power, page 268. Same essential question. How do governments change? Your question asks, how did Jefferson's presidency mark a change in the direction of the federal government? That's Packet 2. Packet 3 is Chapter 10, Lesson 2, The Louisiana Purchase, page 274. The essential question here is, how does geography influence the way people live? And you're asked, how did the geography of the Louisiana Territory shape the goals of the Lewis and Clark expedition? That's Packet 3.
And Packet 4 is Chapter 10, Lesson 3, A Time of Conflict, page 278. The essential question is, why does conflict develop? Your question asks, how did the Embargo Act reflect Jefferson's attempt to use economics rather than war to resolve international conflicts? That's Packet 4.
Remember to complete all of classwork and homework. You should be up to Lesson 4 for Chapter 17. Also, you should have completed year review questions from day 1 to day 6.